Hi, I'm TJ, and this is my 1997 first generation Lotus Elise. Now, I bought this car when I was 18, it was the first car I ever bought, and then I ran into one small issue. I couldn't afford the insurance. So for a year, I drove a 1.25 Fiesta. And I'm quite glad I did, because could you imagine the first time you're at a set of traffic lights, they've just gone green, it's 5 o'clock rush hour, and you've stalled it 5 times. I'm glad that was in the Fiesta, and not in this. Now, with an Elise S1, there's a handful of problems. And by handful, I mean one. The engine. The Rover K-Series engine. Now, anyone that can remember back that far knows what's coming next. Head gasket failure. So my head gasket didn't just fail. My head gasket failed. So piston 3 burst the liner, bent 3 con rods throughout the engine, and then I ended up having to rebuild the entire rotating assembly. Which isn't something you ever want to do. Ever. But anyways, it's back on the road. Things are going great when I run into one more issue. You see, alternators make the power for your engine. They keep the electricity ticking, but they don't like getting hot. And these ones got hot. I don't know who designed this. I don't know who put the alternator where they put it. But he's a monster. He's a bad man. This thing right here is my worst nightmare. You know, the first time you change one of these, it's one of those jobs where the car's a bit of a faff, but exotic sports car, it's the way they are. I don't mind removing engine mounts. I don't mind having to jack the engine up slightly to make space. I don't mind. By the third time, you start minding. By the sixth time, it has killed a piece of your soul. There's nothing left. I'm dead inside. Because of this thing. Now, that leaves me with some options. Now, I wanted to tune the K-Series, I wanted to get a bit more power out of it, but to be honest, after number 6 of changing those alternators, my options were engine swap or light it on fire. So that's why we're gathered here today. I think I'm out of petrol. Engine swap it is. So the plan is a Honda K20 swap. I've got an engine from a Civic Type R. This is quite a common swap with the Lotuses, so I know it's been done and I know it can be done. Now, I'm going to be taking a much more DIY approach to some of the things you see out there. I'm not going to be spending big money on stuff from some of the kits. I'm going to do as much of it myself as I can. Now here you can see I've removed the rear bodywork. I've got some sound deadening down. Hopefully I'll be able to hear myself think on the motorway now, but I'm not holding my breath. Now the rear suspension, all been removed. Main reason for that is I want to pretty it up a bit. I drove this car for 2 years, every day, winter, summer, spring, whatever, it was my daily driver, so you can see they're a bit rusty. The other reason is you can see I've made a modification here. You've got to cut this strut off, move it 1 inch further back, and then that clearances the sump on the Honda engine. Now the big job for today is going to be grinding back what's left of the strut, and if I've got time, maybe getting a wee bit of paint in. Get this all looking nice and shiny again. I've cleaned off the remains of the old strut. It's not perfectly round like the rest of the wishbone, but hey, once there's a wee bit of paint on it, won't really be noticeable. The main worry is just to be careful not to scuff these, because they're nylitron bushings and they're quite expensive to replace. So that looks good. Hit it with the wire wheel now, and then a wee bit of thinners, maybe carb cleaner, just to get any grease off, and should be good for paint. So next up, to get the paint to stick, we need to get rid of the grease. As well as after the wire wheeling, there's going to be a lot of dust and things like that on here, all of which can lift off with the paint. So we need degreaser. Now, if you can't make your own degreaser, store-bought is fine. Anything from brake and clutch cleaner like what I've got here, to carb cleaner, to even petrol, all will do the job fine. Then you just need a rag and start wiping. And that's one set of wishbones ready for paint. And that's one set of wishbones ready for paint. So now that everything's degreased and the flaky rust is gone, we should be able to put metal paint straight on there. Now, the upside of the metal paint says you can put them onto rust, so I'm not too worried about this stuff in here or kind of what's left around there. You can just go straight on, it'll bond to the rust, bond to the metal, and make things pretty and protect you from rusting further in future. So now that we've wire brushed, rubbed down and degreased these, we're more or less ready to paint. You just want to make sure that you've got rid of all that dust that tends to come off with the wire wheel. Otherwise, your paint will lift. Now with stuff like wishbones and anything else really, ideally you'd want to powder coat them. But, well, my seats recently get eaten by mice and I'm on a student's budget, so I ain't paying for that. On the upside though, you get this stuff called Hammerite. It's direct to metal paint, you can use it on anything from car parts to fences. This goes straight on, it will go onto rust, you don't need a base coat or a top coat, this does all three in one. So I'm just going to pop this open, give this a coat, and it should come up looking a lot better. Now with this stuff you don't really need anything fancy, just whatever cheap throwaway brushes you've got, and then just slap it on. So that's us pretty much done prettying up the suspension. I've got 2 coats of Hammerite on here. It's got a decent coating and it feels almost plasticky. Now this is pretty durable stuff, not as durable as powder coating, but to be honest, it's a lot less expensive. So if you've got the time and you want to save a bit of money, it's a viable option. Now I've also hit the tie rods up here with a couple of coats as well. They'll be coming off the car pretty quickly, but they might be on there for a week or two, so I might as well do them while they're here. These are notorious for breaking on the S1s, especially with sticky tyres and a bit more power. So I've got something a bit shinier and substantially more durable to go on. Now, when you put the Hammerite on, it's worth remembering you want to put it on thick, otherwise you'll end up with a lot of patches and some of it showing through. And then you've got to do more coats, and that's just a waste of time. Brushes don't matter, this is just a fence painting brush. If you want to use it again afterwards, just stick it in some thinners, otherwise it will go a bit plasticky. So let's get these back on the car and see how it looks. Hello there, and welcome to my engine bay. So as you can see, we've already got some sound dampening done. Now this stuff should reduce a lot of the vibrations that come through. With this being an aluminium monocoque, there's a lot of drumminess you get when there's nothing on it. But you can still hear quite a lot of it even with the sound deadening on. Now this offers some heat proofing, but I want a bit more, especially on this main section right behind the engine here. So what we're going to go with is this Reflectagold stuff. Now this is about as thin as paper, it takes up a lot less room than the old factory heat insulation, which was about that thick, made of foam and sort of fiberglassy stuff. As well as the foam tended to trap water against the aluminium, leading to a bit of corrosion. And to be honest, on aluminium cars, you don't want to be dealing with corrosion, otherwise you'd have bought something made of steel. So this stuff just sticks down, quite easy to put on, and it should do most of our bulkhead here. So that's the main area of my engine bay coated in Reflectagold. This will help keep the temperatures down and is more or less the last thing I have to do in this engine bay before I move on to fitting up the engine mount and getting the engine in. However, before I do that, I've got to prepare the engine. I've got to get a gear linkage on, I've got to make some modifications to the gearbox, I've got to cut sections off of that, and 1 or 2 other little things before it goes in the back of here. But as far as the car's concerned, that's it ready to go in.